It was a Friday straight out of hell. It was pouring rain, and I was driving to Harpersville to meet with a client who was considering switching to a cheaper supplier. Losing this client meant reducing production and laying off employees, and there was no way I could stop it. The new supplier's prices were so low that we couldn't compete, even though our quality was far superior. I don't understand how they can sell at that price while maintaining quality like we do, I sighed, but the client just shrugged, his eyes fixed on the lower figure on the competitor's price sheet. I drove home through the torrential rain, feeling heavy-hearted. This entire week had been a complete disaster. My wife, the woman who had been by my side for 10 years, announced she was leaving me for a wealthier man. "He's got more money than God, so I don't need anything from you," she said coldly, handing me the divorce papers before walking out of our house, leaving me feeling utterly empty. I read the papers thoroughly. She didn't ask for anything except her freedom. I signed my name, copied a set for myself, and sent them off first thing Monday morning. On the way home from work, I stopped at Lowe's to buy a lock-changing kit. 10 years of what seemed like a good life crumbled to dust. My wife was gone, my client was slipping away, and the bad weather only added to the weight on my shoulders. Somewhere between Harpersville and my house, I saw 3 figures walking slowly on the shoulder of the road. I slammed on the brakes and stopped the car. My thoughts raced, reminding me just because your life's falling apart doesn't mean you should act like a jerk. So I reversed and pulled up next to them. Rolling down the window, I said, "Hop in." It was a woman in her early 30s with 2 kids, probably 5 or 6 years old. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice trembling with cold. We had given up after 10 cars drove by without even slowing down. "Why are you walking in this rain?" I asked. "I had a fight with Will, and he kicked us out of the car about 2 miles back," she replied, sadness lacing her voice. "In this storm." She just shrugged. We drove 5 more miles in silence. I finally asked where she wanted to go. "I don't know. Do you know if there's a homeless shelter in the next town?" she asked hesitantly. "I'm not sure." "Don't you have any family around here?" "We're not from here. We left Michigan and are heading to Salt Lake. My whole family went back to Michigan. All our clothes and stuff are in the Tahoe." I kept my eyes on the road, wondering what kind of man could throw his wife and kids out of the car in a rainstorm like this. She must have read my mind because she said, "Maybe it's my fault. I should have kept my mouth shut," but I told him about his drinking and drug use. I was driving until he sobered up. I guess he finally had enough, pulled over, and told me to get the kids out of the car. When I refused, he got out, dragged me out, picked up the kids, and put them outside. It all happened so fast that I didn't even get my wallet. Then he just drove off. He was drinking and using drugs while driving. I couldn't get him to stop. I wanted to ask why she was with a man like that, but I didn't. In the rearview mirror, I saw the 2 kids shivering from the cold, and I made up my mind. Even if there was a shelter in the next town, they weren't going there. They were coming home with me. I was just a mile away from my house when I saw flashing police and ambulance lights. Slowed down and pulled over to avoid the accident. It looked like a head-on collision between a semi and a car. As I slowly drove past, the woman cried out, "That's our Tahoe." I stopped, and she jumped out of the car and ran to the police. I tried to comfort the kids, who were becoming increasingly anxious. "Why did Mom leave us here? What is she doing? Is she coming back?" one of them asked. "Your mom's just talking to the nice policeman. She'll be right back," I said, doing my best to reassure them. "My name's Hades. What's yours?" "I'm Peter, and my sister's Sophia. We're twins, and we're about to start school," he said. Sophia was sucking her thumb, looking like she was on the verge of tears. I tried to distract her. "Sophia, are you excited to start school?" I asked gently. She nodded but kept sucking her thumb. At that moment, the car door opened and the woman returned. "It's bad, isn't it?" I asked quietly. "The worst it could be. Apparently he drove into oncoming traffic and got hit head-on by the semi." After glancing quickly at the kids, she added, "I'll never have to worry about him driving drunk again. My kids were smart enough to grab my wallet, but I won't be able to get the rest of our stuff until they tow it somewhere." I saw her struggling to hold herself together, so I said, "I'll take you to my place. I've got 3 empty bedrooms, so there's plenty of room. Get a good night's sleep, and tomorrow you can start making phone calls." "Phone calls?" "You'll need to call your family and let them know. You'll need to call the insurance company about the car. If he had life insurance, you'll need to contact them. You'll have to make arrangements for his funeral, and I'm sure there will be other shenanigans you'll want to make. Right now, what we need to do is get you and the kids out of those wet clothes and into something warm and dry." "But all our clothes were in the Tahoe," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm sure I have some things you can use temporarily," I replied. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us," she asked, looking genuinely puzzled. "I know your kids. We introduced ourselves while you were talking to the police. I'm doing this because I believe in karma. Someday, I might have a family, and if they were ever in trouble and I wasn't around, I'd hope someone kind would step in to help them." She stared at me for a long moment before saying, "My name's Mia, and thank you." When we got to my place, I showed them to their rooms and the bathroom, then told them to get out of their wet clothes and take a hot shower while I found them something to wear. "Did you eat dinner before getting caught in the cold rain?" I asked. "So no, we were going to stop in the next town," Mia replied. "I'll see what I can put together," I said. Most of Sapphire's things were left behind when she walked out, so I gathered some clothes for Mia and grabbed a few of my t-shirts for the kids until I could wash their wet clothes. I set the clothes on the bed in Mia's room, then knocked on the bathroom door, cracked it open, and shouted over the noise of the shower to tell them to bring their wet clothes downstairs. I headed to the kitchen and checked the fridge to see what I had. I found enough ground beef to make some steak, so I fired up the stove and got to work on dinner. When they came downstairs, I got my first real look at Mia. She was a total knockout. Wet and disheveled, she looked decent, but all cleaned up. She was a solid 12 out of 10. I took their wet clothes and tossed them in the dryer. Mia settled Peter and Sophia in front of the TV, then joined me in the kitchen, where I was opening a can of green beans. She offered to help, but I told her I had it covered. She sat at the kitchen table, watching me quietly for a while before speaking up. "Does your wife know we're staying here?" she asked hesitantly. "I don't have a wife anymore," I said flatly. "You have this big house all to yourself?" she asked, her voice full of surprise. "I did have a wife," I explained. "Our plan was to fill the rooms with kids. We tried for years before we found out she couldn't have children." "So you had a wife but you don't anymore?" she asked, a hint of confusion in her voice. "She left me for a richer man," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "She said he had more money than God." Her words, not mine. "How long has she been gone?" 5 days, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She walked out last Sunday." Dinner was ready, so she called the kids over to the table. While we ate, Peter and Sophia talked excitedly about a puppy they were going to get when they reached Utah and all the new friends they would make in school. Out of nowhere, Sophia looked at me and asked, "Are you our new daddy?" The question caught me off guard, and I struggled to find an answer when, thankfully, the doorbell rang, saving me. I opened the door to find Sapphire standing there in the rain. "My key doesn't work," she said flatly. "I'm not surprised," I replied calmly. "You don't live here anymore." "I just came to pick up some things I left behind," she said, trying to step past me, but I blocked her way. "So you don't have anything here," I said firmly. "Come on, Hades, let me grab what's left in the closet and I'll get out of your hair," she insisted. "Did you not hear me? You have nothing here anymore," I repeated, more sternly this time. "Bullshit, Hades, and you know it," she snapped. "I left some dresses and shoes in the closet." "Yeah, you did," I admitted, "and I packed them up and donated them to Goodwill." "You had no right to do that," she yelled, her voice rising. "Of course I did. When you left, you said you didn't want anything and that your new man had more money than God. You walked out the door and left me with nothing but memories. I didn't want any of your stuff hanging around, reminding me of you, so I got rid of it," I said coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have guests, and I need to get back to them," I added, closing the door in her face. I had lied. Her clothes were still in the closet because I hadn't decided what to do with them yet. Goodwill had just popped into my head as I was talking. It did sound like a good idea though, and I figured I'd deal with it later. When I got back to the kitchen, I hoped Sophia had forgotten her question, but it was clear from her curious eyes that she hadn't. So luckily, Mia had apparently handled it while I was at the door. As I sat back down, Peter asked who was at the door, Uncle Hades. A lost traveler asking for directions, I replied with a smile. After dinner, Mia set the kids up in front of the TV again while I cleaned up. She insisted on helping, but I told her to stay with the kids, knowing this whole situation must be strange and even a little scary for them. As we finished up, Mia turned to me with a serious expression. All of this, it's so odd and probably weird for them. You don't think? I reassured her that everything would work out. Kids are resilient, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. Later, when the kids were in bed, Mia and I sat on the couch TTV. There was a gap between us when we first sat down, but after a few minutes she shifted closer and took my hand. I looked at her, and she smiled softly, saying, "I've already made my intentions clear. I've got to start somewhere." We sat there in silence, hand in hand, watching TV until it was time for bed. We each went to our separate rooms, but as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Mia and her situation. Something about it just didn't sit right with me. But then again, it was none of my business. The next morning, I woke to the smell of bacon frying. When I went downstairs, Mia was in the kitchen making breakfast. "How do you like your eggs?" she asked. "Over hard," I replied. "Tommy used to like them that way," she said quietly. "Are the kids up?" I asked. "Not yet. I'll wake them when breakfast is ready," she said. Over breakfast, I mentioned that I needed to run into the office for about an hour. "Will you and the kids be okay while I'm gone?" I asked. "We'll be fine," Mia assured me. After eating, I headed into work to finish up some paperwork from the business meeting the day before, then hurried back home. The kids were watching cartoons on TV, and Mia was sitting on the porch with the morning paper when I arrived. "Find anything interesting in that rag?" I asked, half jokingly. "A few jobs I might be interested in applying for and some places for rent," she replied thoughtfully. "Deciding against Salt Lake?" I asked. "I haven't made up my mind yet. I can't keep imposing on you," Mia said, her eyes reflecting uncertainty. "Ridiculous. You can stay here as long as you need to figure things out," I replied firmly. Mia seemed relieved by my offer to stay longer. She mentioned that the police had informed her of where her Tahoe had been towed, and she asked if I could take her there to collect their things. I agreed, and we loaded up the kids before heading out. We arrived just in time to find Sapphire trying to enter the house again. I asked Mia and the kids to stay put while I got out and approached Sapphire. "What the hell are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "So there are things here I want," she said firmly. "We've already talked about this, Sapphire." I put extra emphasis on her name, knowing she hated it. She preferred Sandy or Sanfew with me in the past. "I still have clothes and shoes in the closet," she argued. "No, you don't. I gave them away to Goodwill," I shot back. "You had no right," she seethed. "When you walked out, you said you didn't want anything from the marriage. Your exact words were, 'I don't need or want anything. My new man has more money than God, and I can buy whatever I want.' You've been gone for over a week, and I didn't hear a word from you. I didn't want your stuff lingering around, so I got rid of it," I said, my voice calm but unwavering. "Now, if you don't mind, I have guests to get back to." Her eyes flared with anger, but she stormed off without another word. So when I got back in the car, Mia asked, "Who was that?" "My wife who wants to be my ex-wife," I replied, trying to play it off. We drove to the tow yard, retrieved her belongings from the Tahoe, and headed back home. Mia looked troubled as we unloaded everything, and she confessed, "I don't even know where to go next." "How far is Salt Lake from here?" "About 8 hours by car." "Why?" I asked. "I have some things to pick up there, but I think I'll stay here if I can find a job," she said thoughtfully. "Salt Lake's a long drive. Do you want me to take you?" I offered. She seemed taken aback by the suggestion. "That's very generous, but I can't ask you to do that." "I don't mind. We could leave Sunday around noon, stay overnight, and get everything done Monday morning. We'd be back by Monday evening," I said casually, trying to downplay the offer. Mia hesitated before replying, "You're helping us because you believe in karma. But don't you think you're going above and beyond?" "Maybe," I admitted, "but it helps keep my mind off what my wife did to me." "Well then, as repayment, I'll cook dinner tonight," she said, smiling. The rest of the day passed smoothly. I worked in the yard while Mia played with the kids. and that evening she made a delicious meal. After dinner, I called my boss at home and arranged to take Monday and Tuesday off. Mia and I spent the rest of the evening watching TV with the kids until bedtime. Sunday came, and we left for Salt Lake. Mia carried a suitcase with her, saying she needed it for what she planned to retrieve. We arrived in Salt Lake after an 8-hour drive, and Mia pointed out a bank downtown. I found a hotel nearby, and we checked in for the night. So Monday morning, we went to the bank as soon as it opened. Mia took the suitcase inside while I stayed in the car with the kids. She returned 20 minutes later, and we headed back home. An hour into the drive, we stopped for breakfast. The restaurant provided coloring sheets and crayons for the kids, and while they were busy, Mia decided to open up. "I can tell my secret is eating at you," she began. "The way you've treated me since you picked us up has shown me you're a good man, and I believe I can trust you." She went on to reveal that in the safety deposit box she had documents that would allow her and the kids to start new lives under new identities, as well as enough cash to support them for several years. The backstory she shared explained why she needed to disappear and why people might be after her. She told me about her late husband Tommy and how he got entangled with some bad people. He did the books for a criminal organization, and without her knowledge, he had siphoned off a small portion for himself. Fearing for their lives if things went south, Tommy had set up fake identities and secured money in a Salt Lake City bank. Eventually, Tommy's misdeeds caught up with him, leading to his tragic demise. Now Mia was on the run with their children, trying to stay one step ahead of those who wanted what Tommy took. So we spent the rest of the drive in silence. Mia occupied herself with the kids while I focused on the road, my thoughts racing. When we got back to the house around dinner time, I decided not to go home directly and stopped at a local diner. As fate would have it, Sapphire walked in with a much older man, someone old enough to be her father. She saw me with Mia and the kids, and her face went pale. Mia noticed and asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, trying to play it off, but Mia wasn't buying it. "Who's that?" she pressed. "The woman in the orange dress, the one at the table by the restroom. That's my soon-to-be ex-wife," I admitted. "She left you for that guy?" Mia asked, her tone incredulous. "Not exactly for him, but definitely for his money," I replied with a hint of bitterness. "Thank God for dumb women," Mia muttered under her breath. "Why would you say that?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because she set you free," Mia replied. "Maybe not fully free, at least not until the divorce is finalized, but free enough for you to be fair game, and I'm aiming for you." Her words caught me completely off guard. My face must shown it because she laughed softly and said, "Why do you look so surprised? You must know at least a dozen women would be lining up for you the moment they find out you're single. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to be the first in line." "You can't be serious," I said, shaking my head. "You don't even really know me." "I know two things," she said confidently. "First, you're a very handsome man. But more importantly, I know the kind of man you are. A man who rushed in to help a woman and her children without asking for anything in return. And the kind of man most women are searching for. The kind of man I want." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, staring at her. "So I need to use the restroom," she said, getting up from the table. I watched the kids color their sheets and thought about the children Sapphire and I had planned to have before she metaphorically kicked me in the gut. That thought prompted me to glance over at her table, and I saw Sapphire watching me. I wondered what she was thinking. Mia stopped at Sapphire's table on her way back from the restroom. She said something to Sapphire that made her scowl before walking back to our table with a triumphant grin. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked, "What did you say to her?" "I just thanked her for letting you go so I could have a shot," Mia replied smugly. I don't think she liked hearing that. I liked hearing it. Sapphire didn't, and that made me smile, pushing me to do something bold. "Give me your hand," I said to Mia. "Why?" she asked, puzzled. "Just do it." She gave me her hand, and I held it tightly, leaning in to kiss her. When I pulled back, I looked at her sincerely and said, "This is for Sapphire. She's watching us right now, and her face looks like she's about to explode." "Should we hold hands on our way out, then?" Mia asked, grinning. "Absolutely," I replied. We finished our meal, and hand in hand, we walked out of the diner. I had my back to Sapphire, so I couldn't see her reaction, but I hoped it ruined her evening. Back home, we put the kids to bed, and then settled on the couch to watch TV. Just like the night before, Mia scooted close and took my hand, and I could feel the tension between us. After a few minutes, Mia looked at me seriously. "I've made my intentions clear," she said softly, "and I need to start acting on them." She leaned in and kissed me deeply, and any restraint I had melted away. We kissed like teenagers until I pulled back, realizing where this could lead. "I need to go to bed," I said reluctantly. "I'm not stopping you," Mia replied, her eyes full of mischief. We stood up and went to our separate rooms, but just as I was about to climb into bed, my door opened, and Mia walked in completely naked. Mia walked in, completely naked, and closed the door behind her. My mouth went dry, and my heart started pounding. She stood there for a moment, watching my reaction. "I don't know if this is a good idea, Mia," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "It's a great idea," she replied confidently. She walked over to the bed and climbed in, her fingers tracing a path down my arm. "I'm a healthy woman with needs, and I haven't been with anyone for over 3 months. And you don't owe that woman a thing for the way she threw you away, so just enjoy this." So it didn't take much more convincing. I kissed her and things quickly escalated. We gave in to the moment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself just feel. I made sure Mia was well taken care of before I reached my own finish line. When we were done, she slipped out of bed and said, "I'm going to grab a washcloth. I don't go anywhere. Let's see how long it takes you to recover." "Not tonight. I need some sleep if I'm going to be functional at work tomorrow," I groaned. Mia laughed softly. "All right, but tomorrow night there are no excuses. And don't think I'm leaving this bed until the morning," she said, curling up next to me. We drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other's arms. I woke up to the alarm blaring and nudged her gently. "You need to get back to your room before the kids wake up," I whispered. "They'll have to get used to this," she replied sleepily, stretching her arms above her head. "Because unless you kick me out, I want this to be a regular thing. And if I have my way, they won't be calling you Uncle Hades much longer. I fully intend to make it Daddy Hades once you're divorced." "Don't I get a say in this?" I joked, raising an eyebrow. "Of course," she replied with a playful glint in her eye. "Yes, dear, whatever you say, and obviously my love will be a frequent part of your vocabulary." She looked at me for a moment as if weighing my reaction and then asked, "Do we have time for one more round?" I glanced at the clock and sighed. "If we're quick," I said, already knowing it wasn't going to be quick at all. When I left for work that morning, Mia was getting the kids into the Tahoe to drop them off at school. She arrived at the office later and came straight to my desk to plant a quick kiss on my cheek. "Marking my territory," she said with a smirk before heading off to the accounting department. I couldn't help but notice the looks of disapproval on a few of my colleagues' faces. I figured it was time to set the record straight. I stood up and addressed the entire room. "Listen up, everyone. I can see some of you aren't too thrilled about Mia showing affection, but it's none of your business. My wife left me for another man, so I'm free to do as I please. Got it?" Most of them nodded in understanding, and I returned to my desk. Work passed smoothly, and I headed home to prepare dinner while Mia picked up the kids from daycare. After dinner, we played with Peter and Sophia until it was their bedtime. Once they were tucked in, Mia and I sat on the couch, holding hands as we watched TV. When it was time to sleep, we both headed to our rooms to change, but Mia soon appeared in my doorway, ready to spend the night. This became our routine for the next 2 months, and things were going well until the unexpected happened. It was a Friday, and 10 minutes before lunchtime, Sapphire showed up at the office. "I'm here to take you to lunch," she said bluntly. "Why would I want to have lunch with you?" I asked, incredulous. "Because we need to talk," she replied, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed to meet her at the Village Inn on Wilcox. She was already seated in a booth when I arrived. After placing our orders, she took a deep breath and said, "I'm miserable without you." "Who's miserable?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I am, obviously," she said, looking annoyed. "You can't be serious," I replied flatly. "Leaving you was the dumbest thing I ever did," she said, her voice breaking. "It took me less than 48 hours to realize that. But it's taken me this long to work up the courage to crawl back and ask if you can find it in your heart to take me back." "And what about the guy with more money than God?" I asked bitterly. "It was a mistake," she admitted, her eyes downcast. I was blinded by his promises of a luxurious life traveling on his yacht and private jet to all the places I'd ever dreamed of seeing. Paris, London, Madrid. I thought it was what I wanted. Why the change of heart? I asked, crossing my arms. I realized that when I imagined going to those places, I wanted to be there with you, not someone else, she said, her voice thick with regret. She looked down at her hands, taking a shaky breath before continuing, I did this for you. You left me for my sake? I scoffed, unable to hide the disbelief in my voice. That's insane. Hades, I didn't cheat on you, at least not physically. Bert wanted me, but I told him I wouldn't do anything until I was divorced. He didn't like it, but he accepted it. I left because I couldn't stand lying to you anymore, she confessed, tears welling up in her eyes. What lie? I asked, my skepticism growing. I always knew you wanted kids, and I did too, she began. We tried and tried, but nothing worked. After 5 years, I went to a doctor and found out that I couldn't have children. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd leave me for someone who could. I saw how you looked at families with kids, and I couldn't bear the thought of you resenting me. So I decided to step aside so you could find someone who could give you what you wanted. I remembered that doctor's visit. She had come home and told me everything was fine, that the doctor had said we just needed to keep trying. That lie had led me to get tested, and that's when I discovered the truth. I was the one who was infertile. I never told her because I was scared she'd leave me for someone else. It was a mess, both of us lying to each other out of fear and insecurity. I loved her. Hell, I still loved her. It would have been so easy to just open my arms and say, come home, if it weren't for one nagging doubt. I couldn't believe she hadn't cheated on me with Bert. They must have known each other for months before she left me. Well, you don't just meet someone and then rush home to end a marriage. And if they'd been together for months, there was no way I could believe she hadn't slept with him. And yes, I knew it was hypocritical of me to be upset about her being with someone else while I was here, getting involved with Mia. But my justification, at least to myself, was that after Sapphire handed me those divorce papers, I wasn't bound by any vows to stay faithful. Can you forgive me? She pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Can I come home? I don't know, Sapphire, I said slowly. Your story just sounds so crazy it's hard to believe. I'll need time to think about it. She looked crushed, and I saw a single tear roll down her cheek. She reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper, sliding it across the table. This is my new phone number, she said softly before getting up and leaving in a hurry. I watched her go, wondering if there was any way to piece this all back together. But then there was Mia. God, what a mess. When I got back to the office, Mia wasted no time coming up to me. What did she want? She demanded, her eyes narrowing. Who? I replied, trying to buy myself a moment. Your ex. What did she want? Mia pressed, her voice firm. She wants me back, I admitted. What did you say? Mia asked, her eyes locked onto mine. I told her no, I said, not missing a beat. Good, Mia said, her voice steady. Because I'm not giving up on you. But things weren't as simple as just saying no to Sapphire. Not long after, around 2:45 in the afternoon, 2 men in suits entered my office. The receptionist tried to stop them, but one of them flashed his badge and announced loud enough for everyone to hear, We're with the FBI. We need to speak with Hades Westover. And everyone went silent, and the room suddenly felt like it was holding its breath. The men approached my desk, and the taller one introduced himself. I'm Special Agent Waters, and this is Agent Daniel. We have reason to believe you know the whereabouts of Mia Pinckney. Is that correct? I played it cool even as my mind raced. Can I see some ID? I asked, buying time to think. They both showed their badges. I nodded and took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. What's this about? I asked. You don't need to know the details, Waters said sternly. Just answer our question. Do you know where Mia Pinckney is? His attitude was getting on my nerves, so I decided to mess with him. I picked up the phone and dialed the local FBI office. So when I got through, I asked to speak to someone who could verify the identities of 2 agents. I was transferred to an agent named Delsey, who confirmed that both Waters and Daniel worked there. I handed the phone to Waters, saying, Agent Delsey wants to speak with you. Waters took the phone and had a brief conversation before hanging up and turning back to me. His jaw was clenched as he asked, Do you know where she is or not? Describe her, I demanded, playing dumb. Agent Waters gave a description that matched Mia exactly. I sighed and nodded. Yeah, I know her, but she's been using the name Mia Henderson. She works in accounting. Show us to her office, Waters ordered. I led them to accounting, but Mia wasn't at her desk. I asked Hank, who sat nearby, where she was. Not sure. She got up and left about 10 minutes ago. Might have gone to the restroom, Hank said with a shrug. Waters asked me to show him where the restrooms were, and they both checked inside, but Mia wasn't there. So maybe if you told me what was going on, I could help, I offered, trying to diffuse the tension. Agent Waters looked at me like I was an annoyance he had to tolerate. You don't need to know. Just take us through the building and show us any places she could be hiding. I was fed up with his attitude, so I turned and said, I've got work to do. You're on your own. On my way back to my desk, I glanced out the window and noticed Mia's Tahoe was gone. A sinking feeling in my gut turned to dread. I sat down at my desk and waited, knowing the agents would be back soon enough. It didn't take long. Waters and Daniel approached my desk, and this time Waters seemed less composed. We need you to cooperate, Mr. Westover. If you know anything that can help us, you need to tell us right now. If you're hiding information, it could result in charges of aiding and abetting a fugitive. A fugitive. Mia was running from more than just an abusive past. I noticed her car isn't in the parking lot anymore, I admitted, watching their reactions. She probably heard you announcing yourselves and took off. She's been staying with me until she could find her own place. If she's gone, it's probably to get her things and leave town. Waters' eyes narrowed. You need to take us to your house. Now. On the way to my car, they asked for a description of Mia's vehicle. I gave them the make, model, and license plate number. So we were halfway to my house, the agents following behind me, when we hit a traffic jam at an intersection. I could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles ahead, and a semi-truck crumpled into the side of a white SUV. My heart sank. No, please. I pulled over and got out of the car. Waters rolled down his window and yelled, What are you doing? We need to get to your house. I ignored him and walked toward the wreck. The driver of the semi was sitting on the curb, head in his hands, repeating it wasn't my fault. I had the green light. I couldn't stop. While I approached the white SUV and saw the unmistakable outline of Mia inside, her head slumped against the steering wheel. Her eyes were open, but lifeless. I stood there, frozen in shock, as the paramedics pulled her out of the wreckage and confirmed what I already knew. She was gone. As I walked back to my car, Agent Waters was still shouting, but I wasn't listening. Daniel got out of their car and came up to me, seeing the grief on my face. Is that her? He asked, his voice softer than before. Yeah, I choked out. Daniel swore under his breath and went to speak with the officers on the scene. Waters was still fuming, and as I passed by, he muttered, I'm going to make sure you regret crossing me. I looked at him coldly and replied, Do your worst. The drive back to the office was a blur. The only thing I could think about was Peter and Sophia. Mia was gone, and they had no one else. When I got back to work, I realized I needed to pick them up from daycare. But what was I going to tell them? I pulled out my phone to call social services, but before I could press call, I stopped. The thought of those kids being separated and lost in the system was too much to bear. I made a decision. They're mine now. When I arrived at the daycare, the kids ran up to me smiling and shouting, Uncle Hades. Uncle Hades? The staff must have assumed everything was fine based on the kids' reactions. On the drive home, Peter asked, Where's Mom? Mom had to leave to help the angels, I said softly. She told me to tell you she loves you very much and will always be thinking about you. Will she get wings? Peter asked. I'm sure she will, I said, trying to hold back my emotions. And she'll get one of those shiny halos too, I added, turning to Sophia. At home, I turned on their favorite cartoon, Dora the Explorer, and let them watch while I cleaned up. I silently thanked the stars that they were still too young to grasp the full meaning of death. The next morning, I dropped them off at school, promising to pick them up later. As I drove to work, I knew I needed to sort out Mia's things and look for anything that might give me clues about what she was really running from. When I got to the office, I called the local FBI and asked to speak to Agent Daniel. When he got on the line, I requested a meeting at the Village Inn at noon. Daniel agreed, and when we met, he was alone, just like I had asked. After ordering our drinks, I said, I need more information before I decide what to do next. I want to know why you're after Mia. I'll tell you what I know, and then you can decide if it's worth telling me the truth. I recounted my entire story of meeting Mia, but left out the part about the safety deposit box. When I finished, I looked at Daniel expectantly, and he seemed to be weighing his words. "She lied to you," he finally said. "The real story is that she was a vice president at a bank, and she embezzled money for years before anyone caught on. Somehow she found out they were investigating her, and she ran with her boyfriend Will Carroll. We know about Carroll's accidental death, and we came here hoping Mia was still around. When we found out you were involved, we came to see if you knew where she was." "What do you want from me now?" I asked, trying to process everything. "Just the evidence she left behind, if you have it," Daniel replied. "I've got her belongings, including 3 sets of fake IDs and information on 2 bank accounts in the Cayman Islands," I said, watching his reaction. Daniel nodded, taking out his phone. "Cancel the search warrant," he said to whoever was on the other end. After a pause, he continued, "I'm with Westover. He has what we're looking for." After hanging up, Daniel asked, "When can we get the items?" "You can follow me home from here or wait until tomorrow morning when I bring them to work," I offered. "Tomorrow is fine," Daniel replied, extending his hand. We shook on it, and I went home that evening, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school and headed to the office. Agent Daniel arrived around 8:30, and I handed over Mia's belongings, the fake IDs, the Cayman Islands bank information, and whatever else she had left behind. Daniel examined the contents and nodded, looking more at ease. "I have to admit," I said, "it was tempting to hold on to those accounts. It's a lot of money for one person to just walk away from." Daniel looked at me thoughtfully before replying, "You made the right call. You'll sleep better at night knowing you did the right thing." I wasn't so sure about that, but it was done. He thanked me again and left, taking Mia's belongings with him. As he walked out of the office, my boss, Bob, walked up to me, a questioning look on his face. I updated him on everything that had happened. When I finished, he surprised me by saying, "You did good, Hades. It was the right thing to do." The morning passed quickly, and soon it was time to pick up Peter and Sophia from school and drop them off at daycare. As I drove to the Village Inn to meet Sapphire, I thought about everything I'd been through and how to navigate this next conversation. When I arrived, Sapphire was already seated, and she seemed anxious. After we exchanged pleasantries, she asked, "So, what's this about?" I sighed and said, "I need to confess something. I'm just as much to blame for our marriage falling apart as you are. When you lied about the doctor's visit, I got suspicious and got myself checked out. I didn't tell you, but I found out that I'm the one who's infertile. I can't have kids. I lied to you for the same reason you lied to me. I was afraid you'd leave me for someone who could give you the family you wanted." She stared at me, wide-eyed, processing the revelation. Finally, she asked, her voice trembling, "Does this mean I can come home?" "Things have changed over the past 2 weeks, and you might not want to come home anymore," I said cautiously. I told her everything that had happened since she left, including taking in Mia and the kids, the accident, and my decision to keep Peter and Sophia. I explained that I wanted to raise them and be there for them, and I wasn't planning to change my mind. "Is that why, when I came by, your house felt like," she began but trailed off, searching for the right words. "Yes, that's why," I confirmed. Sapphire didn't hesitate. "Give me the key," she said, her voice steady. "I'll move back in and get dinner ready for when you and the kids get home." "So are you sure?" I asked, surprised by her resolve. "This is a big step." "Don't waste time," she said, holding her hand out. "Give me the key." Later that evening, when I pulled into the driveway with Peter and Sophia, I was nervous about how they would react to meeting Sapphire. I opened the door, and the smell of dinner filled the house. Sapphire was setting the table when I walked in with the kids. I introduced them, and Sophia looked up at Sapphire with innocent curiosity. "Are you our new mommy?" she asked. A tear rolled down Sapphire's cheek as she knelt down and said, "Would you like me to be?" "Yes, ma'am," Peter and Sophia answered in unison. Sapphire wrapped them both in a tight hug, and I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like something that had been broken was finally starting to heal. As we ate dinner, Sapphire asked the kids about their day at school and daycare, genuinely interested in what they had to say. I just sat there, smiling at the way things were finally coming together. 6 months passed, and Sapphire and I found a new rhythm with the kids. We were learning how to be a family again, but the road wasn't without its bumps. One day, I received an unexpected call from Agent Daniel. He invited me to lunch, and my curiosity got the better of me. We met at the same village inn where all of this began. After we ordered our meals, Daniel handed me an envelope. "I wanted to deliver this to you in person," he said. I opened it and saw a check made out to me for $75,000. My eyes widened in shock, and I looked up at him, searching for an explanation. "It's a finder's fee," Daniel explained, smiling, "for helping the bank recover the embezzled funds." I couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, I didn't expect anything in return. But sometimes, doing the right thing pays off in unexpected ways. Back at home, I told Sapphire about the check and everything that had happened at lunch. She was stunned but happy, and we both knew that this money could help secure a brighter future for the kids. We were sitting on the couch that night, watching TV after putting the kids to bed. Sapphire leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I'm really glad I came back." "Me too," I replied, squeezing her hand. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. I had a family again, and I wasn't going to take that for granted. No, life hadn't gone the way I planned, and it never would be perfect, but for now it was good, really good.